And then the student asked me, why? Why would you be proud of us? And it dawned upon me, this is somehow we are forgetting that we are teamwork. We are a ship. And the instructors are maybe the captain, but everyone is needed. The ship will not float without all the sailors. So if the ship then reaches the harbor, then we are proud of that. We are proud of that accomplishment. We need each other. We are collaborating. And the other point, of course, is to the students, you are our future. If we don't teach you well, who will replace us? We all will go at some point. Okay? We all will die. So we need new researchers. We need followers who can pick up where we will leave off. Yeah? So please, young folks, come along with us. We need to steer the boat into the next harbor or to the next shore. You will give us a direction. So that's really important. And of course, the students are the majority. That's a vast number. So I think you are our best allies. And that's really important to keep in mind. Now, I'm in a very lucky situation. When I prepared this talk, I happened to get invited to a lecture that will take place on our campus in about 2 weeks by John Sexton, who is the former president of the NYU. And he published a book. I will show you the title in a minute. And I'm lucky because I'm kind of beating him by 2 weeks. But I realized that I could draw quite a lot of inspirations from him, so let me kind of summarize what he has said in this book and what other important people have said about this book. I think it's very, very instructive. So the book is basically called What is the University? Appeared just last year. And so he's asking in this book, why are we teaching in an academic setting? Because teaching is not necessarily teaching. You can do all kinds of different things. And many people confuse teaching with academic teaching. That's a different thing. Because A, you can either just learn what you need to know, chemical formulas, electric currents, or whatever, or laws, physical laws, or you can learn how to think and learn how to become independent. And so I think the overall problem, of course, in political terms is that we as a university are a revolutionary cell. In a way, a revolutionary cell in the way that you are becoming, hopefully, independent thinkers. And that's bad for those who are in power. They don't want you to think on your own. They want you to believe what they say in the media. They don't want you to criticize and question and try to verify or falsify what is being spread by those in power. And I don't care about Republican or Democrat, whatever. Just simply that power differential. And yet that is our goal. That's why we are a revolutionary cell. We are producing a new generation, I hope, of critical thinkers. That's what academic learning and studying is. We are not in a vocational school. Please, nothing wrong with vocational schools. They are wonderful. We need them desperately. But the university is not a vocational school. You're not getting directly a job. That is not our goal. Our goal is that you become independent thinker and that you understand your subject matter and that you become empowered to do whatever you want to do. We're trying to provide you with the tools, intellectual tools, so you can access the sources and the methods and the concepts, the words, or as we said, the keys for the future. That, I think, is what the university is all about, and he's arguing also very much along those lines. And I just said that. So this is higher education. That's what he's arguing out here in this book. But I would like also to say once more to think about our colleagues in the STEM field. I do not believe that they operate differently. I teach a lot of courses in general education. And what I'm teaching basically in my general education courses is the fundamental principle every scientist needs. And that's simply the principle of verification and falsification. I use this in terms of literature, of interpretation, artwork, music, whatever it might be, but the epistemological principle is the same. And then to write about it. I guarantee you no future scientist will find a job if he or she cannot write, cannot produce a good thesis, cannot argue well in written form. So that's when I talk with my colleagues in the science, they all say, yeah, absolutely, yeah, that's what we do. Verification and falsification. The material changes, yeah, but we are practicing actually in a much easier field to teach the fundamentals, because in a much sweeter way. Because we're dealing with literary texts, for example, and they're fun to read. And they invite us much, much more than a cold-blooded mathematical formula. Okay? That leads us in, and then we teach really the fundamentals of critical thinking. And I think that is something where we certainly can reach out to our colleagues in the science and administration, wherever it might be, and of course your parents. Okay? So, I'm sorry, I have to look back and forth because this is a little bit too small for my own eyes. So my question then thereby is, what does learning mean? You can either define learning as just material learning, or you can understand, I think that's what the academy is all about. Now, of course, I preach to the converted, but it's holistic learning. It is trying to understand the whole, the global thing, to understand the connections so that you can build bridges. Let's say, Glenn, you teach contemporary French poetry, and suddenly somebody says, but I know that Rilke was in France and he influenced them, and then somebody throws in, but I know that Rilke lived in Duino, so Italian. Wasn't he influenced by Leopardi, maybe? And suddenly you have a wonderful European network of a discourse. I think that's really a convincing argument in general. So, holistic learning, and I also want to say what we provide, I think, in the humanities is long-term learning. I mean, we all know that things will be forgotten, particularly mathematical formulas or whatever. But the messages that come from literary texts are life learning experiences, and they are transmitted to us. And because we are often dealing in the humanities with literary texts, they are nicely couched in interesting, fascinating stories, and you can always retell these stories. Because if you think about it, life is a story. We live by telling stories. Life is storytelling. And the more stories you can tell, the better your life. That means you have more experiences. Yeah, so in a way, but telling stories is not just fictional fairy tales, but rather it's a reflection upon the vagaries of life. So in the foreword to this book, I was stunned when I saw that the former Prime Minister of England, Gordon Brown, before Boris, back when he said this wonderful, has this wonderful comment. 40 years ago, I was, like John Sexton, a university lecturer. I spoke of how our great university stood for objectivity, impartiality, rationality, the pursuit of truth. Sounds like Aristotle speaking. The search for knowledge, the defense of reason. Years later, I joked that these are the qualities I had to leave behind when I went into politics. Well, he was so right. Little did I know when I started using that joke that in the course of my lifetime, these values that are central to a free democratic society would be so threatened that my joke would become a call to action. The active defense of these values is now an essential mission for all thinking citizens. So you could sum up the whole thing. We are at the core, at the heart of all things, we teach critical thinking, independence, empowerment. That's why I use the term radical revolutionary self. Okay, so that sounds scary for many people. And then he makes this wonderful comment. George Orwell wrote that, quote, the further a society drifts away from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. You know, fake news.
Right?
How right, how true. Moreover, as John notes, I still quote Gordon Brown, the public's attention span is shrinking and the polarization of our politics has led to a coarsening of debate. Humanities operate the opposite way. I mean, in terms of languages, we all know how hard it is to learn a language, right? It takes years. It's not an easy job. Everyone knows that. You need a lot of energy, effort, self-discipline. Of course, the reward is great. But once you have mastered that language, it stays with you. That's long-term. Yeah, so. The next, and then he continues, the modern phenomenon of globalization involves much more than its economic manifestation. Let me just sort of summarize quickly what we also do, and I think Sexton is completely right, or Gordon Brown. What we do in the humanities is building networks. So, you see, Brazil, we talked yesterday about the German population in southern Brazil, I'm in Arizona, and so forth. Suddenly we realize globalization is not just the huge corporations, but it also means something beautiful, namely study abroad, and you just talked about your program, meeting other people and accepting that other people have different ways of looking at life, have different experiences, different sensitivities, different needs and religious faith maybe, and though all those things can enrich our life. That is globalization, and that's what we can really profit from. So that's this point. And just very quickly, the university is a place where rational thinking is fostered. And maybe that's what the public no longer wants. I don't know. Maybe that's exactly what our politicians no longer want. Yeah. I don't know. That's for you to judge. That's a political comment, okay? And you know probably exactly whom to blame and whom not to. Well, it's up to you, right? But I think that is a very important point. And look, this is now the table of contents in Sexton's book. He's arguing against dogmatism, argues in favor of complexity, and the civic discourse. And chapter 2, the traditional university as sacred space for discourse, and then maybe more religious, but in terms of toleration, maybe you could show the yellow book or pass that around. That is a deep concern for myself, religious toleration. We cannot survive in this world. We cannot survive. Let me emphasize, I scream at you, right? We cannot survive without some form of toleration. There are so many different faiths and religions and values. We must acknowledge them. They are rainbow colors. Accept them. Away with racism. That's the bane of our society. So that's what he's talking about, a university for an ecumenical world. Okay. So, and then fourth point I skip over, and then he himself says he's talking about complexity, nuance. He wants to fight dogmatism, and then he quotes President Obama, who put it really beautifully, if not brilliantly. Instead of our politics reflecting our values, we have politics infecting our communities. Wow, what a statement. Now, so the politicization of our political discourse, and so that's really beautiful. So then he's looking at pluralistic civic society, and he warns about the marginalization of seriousness, and he wants, however, instead a marginalization of dogmatism. So what we are really practicing right now, all together here, and again, thank you for being here, we are working toward the establishment of a discourse, where each voice counts, but not completely. Not every idiot, not every fool should have the same right. So I wrote a letter to the editor a while ago where I sort of put this into perspective and said, should an astronomer, for example, be forced to confront an astrologer? Should an astronomer be forced to accept somebody who believes just in astrology have the same rights? Should someone who is in geology, physics, be forced to accept somebody who believes the earth is flat? That's stupid. How about somebody who's working in oncology, cancer research, and be forced to accept as equal partner somebody who believes in voodoo? Well, I don't think so. Right? Okay, so, and here I turn away from Sexton, and I will try. I know the time is really fleeting, and I probably will be able to talk for 2 more hours, but anyway, I will limit myself. I will probably have to cut off my own talk, and that's perfectly all right. So here I will try to reflect upon how we, from my perspective, can develop further. Remember the metaphor, the Amazon rainforest. I want to accept the Amazon rainforest as a pilot light for my definition of, let's say, literature or the humanities in general, because it's rich and it's very diverse. So what I want us to do, and I want to practice this right now, we must learn how to speak the scientists a little bit. So when we talk about verification, absolutely. When I do an analysis of a poem, I aim for verification. Absolutely. There must be a conclusion. Yes, we can accept that